to throughout the development of Tyranny?
So I think, I mean, obviously the biggest one is Tyranny is a game where you are playing on the side of evil. And that was both in some ways easy, because again, I mentioned a lot of us worked on South Park, we didn't have a lot of filters to try and worry about, but it was also had to be something we had to keep reinforcing, especially early on, because most people, when they come to work on an RPG, a game of this type, there's like this instinctive push towards having like the heroic paladin option for gameplay, and that was something we had to just like keep reinforcing. Like this is not a game about redeeming the world. The world has been conquered by evil. This is a game about living within the new reality of evil having won, and how you choose to survive and prosper in that world. So as we like play through like quests and talking about like what the choices players would have over the course of the quest, it was like, especially when people would first join the team, like having to reinforce it. It's not about having the 5 good options and the 1 attack everyone evil option. It's about having options that play upon the factional relationships and the morally gray area, and giving players a lot of just ways to be, like I'd say, delightfully evil. That you can make choices that you're like, oh, the game's letting me do that, and you see a reaction that really like builds on and reinforces that choice you're making to try and play evil, and seeing you can actually do that very well and actually have that play out in a way that feels satisfying to the player. So that was like one of the main things we had to keep reinforcing, especially early on in the project, that it was okay for designers to be bad. We weren't going to be angry at them for making a quest where they focused on the evil options. That was actually what we wanted. And I think once we'd done that enough, then it just people moved forward and really embraced that idea. I think the other big pillar we had to reinforce throughout the game is that we're making a game that's about replayability rather than initial playthrough length. That this is something that when we first started talking with Paradox was like one of their pillars of games they make is they want games that are highly replayable. And typically with most RPGs, it's a game that has like 40, 50, 60 hours of gameplay that you can replay and get a different like class experience, but a lot of the story is like fairly close to what you experienced before. And based on our like what Paradox wanted out of an RPG and how we wanted to make Tyranny stand out and work with like all the constraints of budget and staffing, all those other things we were looking at, we were going to make a game that was about 20 to 30 hours of gameplay, but that would be wildly different as we were playing through. So we had to work with people to understand that when they're designing an area, they weren't designing just one experience within a given scene. They're just designing 3 or 4 different experiences within that scene, and how those different things could work together within a single Unity scene file and not be incredibly bloated and problematic. So that was something that we had to work with our teams on, understanding how we would actually like implement that in a way that was sane and could actually be done in the time frame we had. So I think those were kind of like the 2 major things that we worked on reinforcing in development.
Yeah. Regarding the first point about letting people be okay with being bad, I'm just imagining like a new Full Sail graduate coming into the studio and just because you turn them into a complete bastard by the time the game's done. But I'm sure that's not the case, though. We do have another question from Gemstrike here in chat. Engine question. They say, I know the game uses Unity under the hood, which we chatted about in the pre-show before we went live, but they asked, did you modify the source? Side question to that, have you ever considered generating additional revenue by selling assets? Interesting.
So the last part I'll answer first. Since this game is published by Paradox, they own all of the assets and IP, so if Obsidian were to try and sell it, we would probably get sued. That would not be a good thing for us.
So that'd be no.
Yeah, we're not going to be trying to sell any of the assets for Tyranny. As far as the engine itself, we use Unity as our game engine and rendering. We do have our own pipeline for generating the assets. If any of you guys followed any of the original like Pillars of Eternity Kickstarter, there's this great backer update video that Josh Sawyer did where he showed how our scenes actually get constructed, where essentially our artists build out the scene as a 3D environment in Maya, and then we render the scene out to actually 2D textures. So, like looking at the scene that we're playing in right now, you see all like the tables and chairs and all these elements that look 3D. Those are actually 2D flat textures that are just baked out with shadow maps and occlusion maps, so that if you move characters around behind them, the actual 3D characters will be occluded by those objects as though they were 3D, but they're actually just 2D flat textures. And the part of the video that Josh did that I'm referring to, he showed a scene that looked like it is now, and then this was loaded in Unity, so he rotated it, and you could see that it was just a completely flat plane with 3D characters walking around on top of it. But given the way our rendering tech works and the camera, it's all done entirely, like, it all still looks like it's actually a fully 3D environment. And the main reason we did it that way, well, there's a couple of reasons. One, by having the flat backgrounds, we can actually have our characters have a lot more detail and animation detail on them because we're not competing for 3D rendering with the background. We just have the 2D plane is rendered with all its detail in Maya and can be as incredibly detailed as we want. And then, since it's just a texture that's being rendered out, we don't have to worry about trying to render all of that at runtime in 3D. And then we can actually, that means we can have more characters on screen with the same within the memory constraints we have. So it's kind of the plus, because it is 2D textures, our artists can then go in and modify those individual texture tiles in Photoshop, so we can do paint overs in order to really enhance certain areas of the scene, or add more mood and lighting and detail that maybe would take far too long to model in Maya. They can go into Photoshop afterwards and add some more hand-painted or adjusted details to the scenes.
It sounds like a similar technique to like what they would do a lot on PlayStation games, like PlayStation 1 games, like first couple Resident Evils, and because of course, you know, with that kind of hardware you couldn't render tons of polygons.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we're trying to, like, even though obviously it's now several years beyond when the Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale games were made, we wanted people with as low-end of machines as possible to be able to play this type of game, so that all of the fans that we had that were backers of the original pillars and fans of this type of game could still play these types of games on their machines.
Yeah. Kind of. Go ahead, Alex.
Oh, I don't know. I feel like, so I kind of want to get into some questions that are a little less game design focused, but we don't have much time left. One thing that's been bothering me that I really want to ask you, and anyone who worked on this game, is like, what do you learn about the nature of evil by exploring its nooks and crannies for 3 years? Like, what have you learned about your own values and like how humans react to like not having an obvious heroic journey to go on in working on this game?
Well, I think it's one of the things we were looking at when we were looking at how to create evil situations, and right now we're seeing one of my favorite moments in the game, which is the end, like toward the end of Act 1.
Yeah.
Anyway, we looked at a lot of just real-world examples when we were looking at like things that have happened over the course of the past century, from how various dictators rose to power, or various complete shifts in societies as various political ideologies came or left from power. Like, that's kind of how we draw a lot of our inspiration from. That it's not, we tried not to do cartoonish evil, even though we're making a game, and because it is a game in a fantasy setting, there's obviously a distance players have between the things we're talking about and their own experience. A lot of the ways that we try to convey what evil was in this world was just looking at what humanity does. I mean, that's I think one of the reasons why I think Tyranny has been very successful in its story about what being evil in an evil world is, that we tried to keep things fairly relatable and grounded in things that actually could happen.
Yeah, very, very timely. A little too real for my. Yeah.
Yeah, the release date was not anticipated. That it was
brilliant release timing.
Yeah, I think there was the Kotaku article that came out the day after the election, and we're like, I really wish this wasn't a reason to vote to buy the game, but I can't stop people from making the connection.
I wanted to briefly. I was sort of keeping an eye on this game over the last couple weeks because my girlfriend was reviewing it for Polygon, and her review actually touched on a lot of things you said today about even she was interestingly, because she didn't play a lot of these games before. She was struggling to learn a CRPG and also grapple with what the themes were in the wake of what was going on. And but I think it stood out. I think the way you've thought about having players interact with evil, even if it's not a clearly good sensation that they have, there's something about this navigation of stuff and negotiating and just trying to sort of live another day. I think it comes through.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
it definitely is one of the things that especially on the narrative team, the writers were they had the struggle of how far to go and where to pull back, and I think it's one of the things that as we've watched people stream the game and read reviews, people playing the game, it's been very interesting, the dichotomy of reactions we've gotten from people, because there'll be certain people who will talk about a scene and say, "Oh, this was really disturbing. I can't believe that I made this choice that led to this thing happening to a character," and they felt very morally conflicted with it. And then at the same time, we'll see other reviews that were very gleeful about "Oh my God, I tried to do this and the game let me. This is awesome." So it has been very interesting watching the various reactions to different choices in the game and how people feel about the choices they made and how some internalize those decisions and what it means about their own personalities as a game player. So that's actually been fascinating from a developer's point of view to watch the different reactions to the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could talk about this for hours, but I'm going to do right by the audience and repeat this question from chat, which is, what's next for you after Tyranny? Are you going to join a different team at Obsidian, or?
That's kind of tied up with the questions I mentioned before about our discussion with Paradox about what is next for the game. So I don't really have an answer at the moment. It's something that's still being discussed, but I don't know yet. We will find out hopefully in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
Right on.
You're going to get over being sick. That's what your first step is.
Absolutely, yeah. That is my my goal, is to not be sick for the rest of the year, which means January 1st I will come down with the flu.
So we do have about 5 minutes left, and I do want to touch on something that we talked about pre-show a little bit. But you mentioned, we haven't really talked about combat design in this game, and I've been watching Bryant with a T play it. And you had mentioned 6-second action rounds.
Oh, yeah. So I think it was related to, we were talking about some of the original design ideas behind the Infinity Engine games, whether it was Baldur's Gate or Icewind Dale, where they were
Classic
a lot of the
D&D.
designs for the game were based on pen and paper Dungeons and Dragons gameplay and trying to recreate that experience in a computer format. And one of the ideas with with D&D is that each character round was effectively 6 seconds of time, and a lot of the design decisions was trying to replicate that idea as far as this thing can take place within 6 seconds. And even though Pillars of Eternity and Tyranny, we're no longer using D&D as the foundation of our rule set. We have very different rule sets for the game. People who played the Infinity Engine games still have certain expectations based on that, so they end up informing a lot of how the design for these games progresses. So one of the things that happens in combat is that each character has a recovery time before they take actions, and part of that is based around the overall pacing of combat with a party-based game, trying to make it something that you can actually understand and follow as the game plays out, and also just based on standards that were set by those original games when they were trying to replicate the D&D tabletop experience.
So your Twitter bio describes you as a gigantic nerd.
This is true, yes.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about more about the D&D influence, and it's quite pervasive amongst obviously RPG video game designers.
But I mean, it's one of those things that, like, I actually played less D&D growing up as other tabletop role-playing games. Like, my friends, like, when I was first got into my first tabletop experience, was actually using a system called Riffs, which was my first experience with party balance. Because I had scoured through books, and, like, the character I was creating was what I would call like a techno mage or techno wizard, which was my level 1 character had a basic attack was a 1d4 like magic bullet pistol type thing, and then the DM who was running the campaign, it was his first time as a DM, so he didn't really think about like excluding certain classes as party. So I created my like techno wizard, and my friend created what was called, I think, a glitter boy, which was giant mechanical powered power armor with a Gatling gun cannon. So like our very first combat encounter, I roll my 1d4 and get like 3 points of damage off. He then proceeds to roll every d6 known to man for his single attack and obliterates the entire enemy party and their entire family as well for 5 generations. So
with Glitter Boy.
With Glitter Boy, yes. It was a
dynamic duo.
I just want to point out that's one of the nerdiest things I have ever heard. To the point that, as a nerd myself, as a giant geek, I am strangely now feeling like an 80s high school thing, and that we are all about, like, some jock is about to jump out and throw us all in a locker just for saying all the words that were just said.
That's every day at Obsidian.
Nice. Yeah. Well, cool. I think we're wrapping up here. Like, we've only got a couple minutes left.
Why don't you talk a little bit about what you've been doing here, Brian?
Yeah, I think that was actually a great mission to stream, because that was just a really cool, like, summing up of all the things. That mission was really cool for me, because it was summing up all the things we've done, and I've done up to this point in this opening act of the game. Like, I was able to get a soldier who I spared earlier to turn on her allies at the cost of her own life. I recruited this new mage character here because I was pretty kind to her earlier, and she was like, okay, yeah, I'll tag along with you. You seem like a good way to not die. And I was able to get through a pretty intense boss fight that I actually watched Carly. I had to help Carly through it when she was playing it, and I was like, oh no, I'm going to have so much trouble with this. And I did, but I was lucky that because I helped her out with it earlier, I was able to figure out some stuff about it. And I also discovered the talent system, which I hadn't known about before because nothing had pointed to me to it. So that's basically been the last couple minutes. I think that was a really awesome start to this, where this game's going to go.
Yeah. So Brian, well, we might have another question here.
Yeah,
we
let's
can
get this
maybe
question
wrap
before we finish it up.
Yeah. So Infinitron asks, did you have to wrestle with memory limitations with regard to the maximum number of characters on screen in Tyranny?
Yeah, there were definitely some issues we had to deal with as far as animation footprint and how data gets saved out into save games. There's actually in our patch that we just released this week, we had a fix for an issue we encountered where the way the engine was saving out animation data, a lot of the data was getting duplicated for every character. So, like, whenever you would save in a scene and then reload, the information, like a single animation controller would get duplicated 5 or 6 times and really bloat a lot of the animation information that was getting loaded into the game, which I think we've saved over 100 megabytes of memory in just fixing that one problem with this most recent patch. So, and there are other memory issues we're trying to track down and solve over the course of the game, and hopefully we'll be able to fix them for future patches. So, it's definitely been things we've had to try and deal with and wrestle with the engine, and even though a lot of problems were solved by Pillars of Eternity team and how they handled things, we were able to grab a lot of that code and fix a lot of those issues. There are still, it's like the story of game development. Whenever you fix one bug, 10 more crop up as a result of that fix. So right. Obviously we're trying to still keep on top of those and get out more patches to help address issues the community is seeing.
Yeah, very cool. So I think we're officially out of time, but really appreciate you coming on, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, the game is Tyranny from Obsidian and Paradox. I am the voice of the ghost of Chris Graft, editor-in-chief of Gamasutra.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. And there's also Bryant and Alex. You could say goodbye to.
Alex, I was going to say you should say goodbye first. Alex?
I think he's gone.
Oh no! Well, we were joined by news editor Alex Waro, or his ghost,
That was
I should
me.
say.
Hi, I hit the mic button by accident. Sorry. Thanks everybody. Brian, you've been
Thanks,
great.
everyone. Bye. Don't forget to subscribe.
Yeah,
you can
please,
you can watch an archive of this as well.
Yeah, we'll have the VOD up shortly. Please subscribe for more developer interviews and gameplay commentary. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.